Okay, hi, we're live. It's Lori Frary, and I have with me Storm Bradford from Mortgage Fraud Examiners. And thank you for joining us, and thank you for listening in. And we're going to talk about...
We're live. It's Lori Frary,
well,
and
there,
I have with me
there it
Storm
is in the
Bradford
background.
from Mortgage Fraud Examiners.
Hold on. Okay. Turn that off. Sorry for that interruption. And we're back. Okay, so I met Storm a few months ago through a group phone call with a bunch of people who have been fighting foreclosure for years. And Mortgage Justice Group, it's a local group that I belong to. I'm sure there's groups like it all over the country. And I instantly saw that Storm had a product and a method that would more than likely work for me a whole lot better than all of the things that I had been trying before. And all of the lost time and lost money and wasted effort and frustration and so on. So I, after that phone call introduction, then I contacted Storm and we started talking, and I have since utilized his services. So hi, how are you, Storm, and how's the weather up there?
Well, actually, it's quite nice today. It's a nice spring day. It's about 72 degrees, not a cloud in the sky, and it's great to be alive.
Ah, great day for a hangout.
Yes.
Okay, so what I'd like, first of all, for you to do, Storm, is to describe for the listeners what you do and what your program is, and maybe just a brief bit of history so that they understand what mortgagefraudexaminers.com does.
Well, I've had a litigation support company for almost 40 years, and we started out doing criminal defense work. We had one of the first innocence projects in the United States, getting wrongly convicted people out of jail. And we did that for a number of years. And then the attorneys that were using us said, well, wait a minute, if you can get these guys out of jail once they're in, you must know how to keep them from going to jail in the first place. And we said, yeah, we do. So then attorneys started to hire us to help them win their criminal defense cases. Then it got to the point that the same attorneys would come back and say, well, wait a minute, can you help me on a civil case? And then we started doing civil cases. For an example, we were brought in to help out on a case to sue Dole Pineapple, and it was highly successful. We got the client $18 million. We've been brought in on several wrongful death cases where we got clients millions. A legal malpractice case got clients millions. And then about 12 years ago, 13 years ago, we started getting a bunch of phone calls from attorneys. How do you win these foreclosure cases? And we said, well, you have to understand what a foreclosure is in the first place. It's a breach of contract case. And the bank is alleging that the borrower breached the contract. And that's why the majority of states are non-judicial states, because in each one of these contracts, the homeowner agreed that if they failed to make timely payments, that the bank could take the house. So the majority of states are non-judicial states, and non-judicial states, all they have to do is run an ad in the newspaper for 4 consecutive weeks and your house is gone. And the reason for that is the legislatures looked at it and said, look, there's no need to get a court involved. This is a confessed judgment. The homeowner said, go ahead and take the house. Just like a car, if we financed the car and didn't make timely payments, they come by with a tow truck, they tow our car away. Why? Because we told them they could within the contract. Even in judicial states where they have to foreclose on you, all the bank has to basically do is come in and say, Your Honor, here's the contract between Mr. Jones and ourselves. Let me draw your attention to this clause in the contract where Mr. Jones agreed that we could take the house if he failed to make timely payments. Here's the proof he didn't make timely payments. That's all the evidence they have to put on. It's really cut and dry. It's really simple. Well, we started out, we thought that what we would do is that we could train attorneys how to do it. And it quickly became obvious to us that there's no way that an attorney could learn what needs to be learned in order to do one of these analysis for a mortgage transaction. It would probably take him as long to learn as it took him to get through law school. So we just basically said, look, we'll do the exams, and then let attorneys go ahead and settle with the bank once we provided the evidence to them or to the borrower. So that's how we got started. So out of that, we formed Mortgage Fraud Examiners out of the litigation support company. Subsequent to that, we started getting a bunch of phone calls from pension funds and hedge funds who buy these notes from the major players. For an example, Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac own 98% of all non-jumbo loans in the United States. And for an example, last year, they sold 18 billion, that's with a B, of non-performing notes. Non-performing notes is basically what they are. It's where the borrower's not paying on the note. So they buy these notes. And so what's happened now is we have these pension funds and hedge funds come to us just to examine the notes. So we're doing that. Now we just started, we're analyzing student loans because the same problems that are with mortgage transactions happen with these student loan transactions. So that's kind of like a history of where we are and where we are today and what we're doing. And so, we try to help as many people as we can.
Okay, so after I discovered you, I asked, as many pertinent questions as I could because I was going to pay money to have my documents examined and my mortgage transaction examined. And I had already paid money for things like securitization audits and attorneys for foreclosure defense, and spent a lot of time with groups and online and reading books and documents, and wasn't ready to throw down any more money and then have it not be any more helpful than anything that I had accomplished so far. Now, I just got out of foreclosure after 9 years of fighting, and was one of the fortunate people who got a reasonable loan modification after many attempts, and signed that and got the bank to the servicer to drop the foreclosure. So that's where I'm at now. But I'm also at the place where Storm has been helping me. Number one, I did pay for an analysis, and here's what one looks like. It's real thick and wordy and very, very concise. And several things, egregious things, were identified in this analysis. And so what I was told by Storm, and this is the process, once you find out what's wrong with your mortgage transaction, you identify and write a grievance letter outlining what's wrong, because in your mortgage original mortgage contract, it says if you find something wrong with your mortgage transaction or any problems, you have to write us and give us the opportunity to cure it, to correct it. So because it's a contract, you follow the contract, and you write the grievance letter and you outline your grievances and you ask them to take corrective action. And so that's what I've done. The first grievance letter went out in about mid-February. We're in April now. I also contacted everybody who had their hands on that mortgage at any given time throughout the 9 years. And that means every servicer, the originating bank, and everybody who was associated with the documents in the origination of the loan. And that goes all the way back to the appraisal, the mortgage application. And then just to add a little fuel to the fire and a little grease to the wheel, I also sent this grievance letter to multiple agencies, from the CFPB, which is the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, to my state attorney general, my state congressman, the FDIC and Fannie Mae, and every agency that controls the financial institutions or is a regulator. And I CC'd all of them on the original letter that I sent to the out as the grievance letter, to make sure they understood that I'm not just some whiny little consumer who wants to bitch at somebody. I mean business, and I want corrective action taken. And so, in the process of understanding, which is a big part of this, you as the person in foreclosure or with the legal problem, whatever it may be, really has to understand what the legal problem is, and in order to fight it properly. And a lot of foreclosure defense attorneys will tell you all kinds of scams and schemes to delay and delay. I can keep you in your home for X number of years and so on. And most people hear their friends and fellows drop off one at a time, losing their house. Another one lost their house. Another one left the group. Another one bites the dust. And so what happens is that, you are running in a defensive position. And so you're just trying to do anything you can to stop the inevitable. And that's the taking of your home. That, is your biggest investment that you've made probably in your life. So I want to kind of go over with you, Storm, one of the things that is the most painful part to swallow as someone who comes to you and is looking for help. And most of the people that are looking for help are, by the time they get to you, which is sad. I wish I would have found you on the first day that I got served papers. But by the time they find you, after all the other scammers that have come down the pike and taken their money and taken their time and made them promises and so on, they're in pretty dire straits. Some people are, close to maybe a trial or there's no time to lose. So what is your first advice to anyone listening to this, to get them to kind of shock jock treatment, to get them to understand that this is a totally different thing than what they've been hearing from all the attorneys and all the scammers and all the book writers and bloggers, and even, the lawyer, most of them, the worst of them are the lawyers themselves. The foreclosure defense attorneys are always coming up with this. Oh, look here, here's another thing you can do. Let's go after MERS. Let's go after securitization. Let's go after standing or robo-signers or any of these other things that we've all heard all the years that we've been involved in this. What is your way of making someone understand not only why that's all failed and why none of those people have ever won anyone their home, but why it's actually detrimental to the stall game, and to try all of these crazy, options? What's the truth?
Well, some people, you can't get them to understand what a foreclosure is. Again, a foreclosure is a breach of contract case. Plain and simple, that's what it is. When a homeowner can wrap their head around that, the light bulb goes off and they understand that that's the only thing that works. I talked to a lady earlier today, kind of like you. She's bought the securitization audit, forensic loan audit, the whole deal. And when I started to explain it to her, she started crying. And she said, oh my God. She says, this is so simple. She says, now that you've explained it, she goes, the light bulb just didn't go off. It was like a nuclear explosion. She goes, the light was so bright that now I understand that what I've been doing is totally incorrect. Unfortunately, we're the only firm in the country that does what we do because we're the only firm in the country that knows how to analyze a mortgage transaction. For an example, we did an analysis for an attorney in Georgia. He's one of the testimonials on our website. And when he got it, he said, Storm, I've seen all this other crap out there. He says, I'm going to tell you flat out. He says, this is the most succinct, complete, perfectly written, perfectly understandable document I've ever seen. That includes court documents and everything else. You guys are terrific. I also want to tell you, if you gave me or any other lawyer in this country from now until the end of the millennium, there is no way any one of us could identify what you people identified in that transaction. We don't know how loans are underwritten. We don't know the inner workings of banks. USPAP guidelines, never heard the term before I read it in the appraisal section of your appraisal. He said, all lawyers really know how to do is stall because they don't know how to do what you guys do. And the reason why they're stalling is they inherently understand that the borrower breached the contract. They just don't know how to analyze a transaction to see if they can get him out of that contract or find fault with the contract and blame the other side. So all we can do is stall. I think you can attest to the fact that what we gave you in your analysis was not conjecture, was not wishful thinking, was not maybe this, maybe that. It was absolute, unequivocal evidence of wrongdoing, provable by court cases and provable by the documents that you have. There's an adage in law, the documents speak for themselves. That's why we cut and pasted your documents into the analysis to show where the wrongdoing was. So if at any time someone wanted to go to court, they don't need an expert witness because the judge doesn't need a reading lesson. All you have to do is say, Your Honor, the fraud is on page 7, and you give him page 7, he can read it for himself. So it's all about, I've been training attorneys for 40 years, young attorneys, old attorneys. It's not what you can allege, it's what you can prove. And if you don't have the proof, you're going to lose. And when you go to court and the judge, the banks put on their case, Your Honor, here's the contract. Here's the clause of the contract where Mr. Jones agreed that we could take the house. Here's the proof he didn't make payments. And the judge turns to you and says, Mr. Jones, what say you? Oh, but Judge, my loan was robo-signed. Yeah? How'd that cause you to miss payments? Oh, but Judge, you don't understand. It was securitized and MERS was involved. Yeah? How'd that cause you to miss payments? We're here because you breached the contract. Now, please tell me the other side breached first, or that there's an error that would allow me to void this contract, or that you were fraudulently induced into this contract by appraisal fraud, broker fraud, title company fraud, or that there's some sort of statutory regulatory mandate that wasn't followed, or the set-offs, recoupment, any of those things. If you don't have that, there's the door. And that's what happens to everybody. And the sad thing about it is, I tell everyone, stalling is a bad thing. The only time it's a good thing is when you have no money, no job, no place to go. Obviously, you want to keep a roof over your head. Other than that, stalling is a bad thing because there's 4 places in every contract where the borrower agreed that they would pay the bank's legal fees. Almost every case that we see that comes down now, they're asking for their legal fees. Sometimes, good majority of the time, they're over $100,000. We had an individual come to us that went to this guy, Neil Garfield. A lot of people have heard about Neil Garfield. He's never won a case in his life, never been involved in a case that anybody has ever won. Every one of them has been foreclosed on. He paid Neil Garfield $37,000, went to court, and the judge was appalled by the arguments that Garfield was making. He said they're utterly ridiculous. So after paying Garfield $37,000, got abused in court. He he had to pay over $127,000 in legal fees and sanctions to the bank. We see this all the time now. We had a client, not unlike you. He had hired this bunch in California, certified forensic loan auditors. He told us that he said, I literally got laughed out of court. He said the judge and the bank lawyers were laughing at this Michael Kerrigan. They said, your arguments are ridiculous. You know, you're basically a boob. Why you even come in here with this nonsense? He contacted us. He was, I can't remember if he was 2 weeks or 3 weeks away from being thrown out of his house. We did an analysis for him. The evidence that he used, they basically, it saved his house. So at the end of the day, it's all about evidence. It's about what you can prove. And the only way to find out what happened in your transaction is to have the analysis done. So I tell people, it's like the commercial on television. What's in your wallet? Well, what's in your transaction? There's
all right. Let me answer to that,
okay.
Because as somebody who has now gone through the process, when I decided to utilize your services, and the first thing that you gave me was a questionnaire to give my side of the story from best memory of what had happened to me, what I had done over the course of the years that I've been in this foreclosure thing. And so I answered that to best of my ability. And then you said, send me all your documents. And when someone says, send me all your documents that have to do with your mortgage transaction, well, most people think, well, you just go in and you get your little folder that they gave you at closing, and it's got everything in there that you've got, and so scan those and send them. No, that wasn't good enough. I ended up scanning 2,000, you could probably know closer than I can.
Well, if you recall, Lori,
2,000 documents.
Yeah. Well, if you recall, what we told you was, you asked, what do you need from me? And I said, the short answer is, if you have anything that dealt with that transaction, we want it.
Right.
More specifically, that means all of your closing documents, your appraisal, any correspondence to include emails, any notices of default, substitutions trustee, loan modification attempts, forbearance attempts, short sale attempts, court cases filed, bankruptcies again. And you were most generous in sending us over a couple thousand pages of documents.
Well, after 9 years, what do you expect?
Which we went through page by page and line by line.
Yes, you did. I can actually testify that you did, because you actually knew my situation way better than I did, and I lived it. So when you're in it, you're in an emotional state. Obviously, I mean, you're basically traumatized the whole time you're in foreclosure, because there's no moment where you can rest your mind, because either you have to write a document, or a hearing's coming up, or you have to have conference with attorney, or just it's constantly something monitoring your case. And the people who do this pro se, representing themselves, have it even harder, because they're the ones having to write everything and do everything and file everything. So when I sent off all of these documents, and I mean, it even kind of got to the point where, well, this is silly, I don't need to send this. And then, I'd casually bring it up to you on a phone conversation. And you go, well, everything. When I say everything, I mean everything, because you don't know what you're looking for. I do. So don't hide anything. So,
and how often did I beat you up?
Yeah, listen, I have gotten one of the best financial educations that I could have ever gotten. And it has really saddened me in a way, in a strong way, actually, that most people I'd have to say 99+% of the American population has no clue about the depth of the pile of shit that they're walking into when they sign a mortgage document or anything, any large contract, because you can't possibly understand all of the nuances of all of the things that are written in those contracts. And most of the time, and you could ask people on the street, did you read and understand every document you signed at closing, including your application before you even went to closing? Did you understand the appraisal method? Did you understand? And everyone can say when you're sitting at closing, they're passing documents to you with stickies sticking out there and sign here and initial there and, hurry up. And there's people sitting around the table waiting for their cut of the deal. And they're all looking at you like, we don't have time for you to read this. And they do send you many of these documents prior, ahead of time of the closing so that you have the opportunity to read them. Most people don't, sadly. And unless you have an attorney sitting right there with you the whole time, reading everything and looking at it, and I believe in put in parentheses, they don't even know what they're looking for because they're not transaction analysts. So there's going to be things that are missed and there's going to be things that are messed up. And the minute you get done with the closing and they hand you your keys and, you just took possession, you take the envelope they give you and you go home and, throw it in the closet in a box. And maybe they'll send you a couple of documents later in the mail. Maybe something had to get recorded or whatever, but you don't look at it. You're just happy. You got a new house, you need to paint the living room and move in and all of this stuff. So as time goes by, the longer it goes by, the more you forget what it is you actually signed. So now the education, going back to the education that I got, is not only do I understand what I signed, but now I understand how I got screwed. And I also understand how to defend myself against what happened, which is part of the storm treatment you get. He's not going to write the grievance letter for you. You have to write that. He's going to give you an outline. You're going to be able to go through the analysis and pick out all the things that are wrong. And it's all, in plain English and easily understood. There's links to the regulations or the law that shows you what they're talking about. But if you're going to be able to defend it, you have to understand it. And so the first way to understand it is to write the grievance letter and to put it in your own words. And that's the only way that you understand it is, just can't just copy and paste a bunch of stuff. You can some, but at the end of the day, I'm in a position now where I have sent this grievance letter to all of these entities, banks, servicers, agencies, whatever, and they do respond. And there are those who it is their job. I had no idea how many regulatory agencies there were over financial institutions. It's incredible. And in my case, the bank that my originating bank was fined $320 million for doing exactly what they did to me. I didn't get any of that money, but there's no way they can say, well, that didn't happen or we didn't do that, because it's already proven that you already have done it and you've already got paid huge fines for it. So you did it to me too. Now, how are you going to compensate me for my harm? So now when you get a transaction, or when you start getting all these documents, you have a client and they've start sending you documents and as much information as you can. you are looking for specific things, but you're looking at everything. And why is it that this pre signing, the things that happened pre-signing of the documents, plus what any servicer did post signing of the mortgage, why is this more important than, oh, I have known robo-signers on my transfers, or I have they don't have standing, or they don't have the wet ink contract, or whatever? Why is it more important for the default to be defended?
Well, because again, it's a contract. What happened post contract really has nothing to do with the contract at all, because you breached the contract. You told the bank, if I don't make payments, take the house. The bank's saying, okay, I'm going to do what you told me to do because you haven't been making payments. So you have to find something wrong with the contract. Also, too, nobody has ever won a case ever arguing robo-signing, produced the note, MERS, securitization, didn't get into the trust in time, all the other stall tactics that are out there, ever. But people who have attacked the contract, there's been dozens of multi-million-dollar awards, dozens and dozens of free title to property, and every conceivable settlement offer you could think of about 100% of the time. We've never done an analysis ever that we didn't find something that was wrong with that contract. So it's all contractual in nature. One of the analogies that I use, and you had even come up with your own analogies on some of it, but one of the analogies that we use is, let's say you had a contract that somebody was going to buy 100 crates of oranges and pay $10,000 for those 100 crates of oranges. And that's what the contract says. I will supply 100 crates of oranges, and for that, you're going to pay me $10,000. So that's a pretty cut and dry contract. Now, the guy delivers the 100 cases of oranges, and the guy that receives them doesn't pay the $10,000. Looks like a pretty open and shut case, just like a foreclosure, pretty open and shut case. Didn't make payments, breached the contract. Guy didn't pay for the oranges, breached the contract. Now, the supplier of the oranges takes him to court, gets up, says, Your Honor, here's the contract between Mr. Jones and ourselves. If you can see right here, he was supposed to pay us $10,000. He never sent us a dime. Mr. Jones, okay, Mr. Jones, what say you? Well, Your Honor, that's true. The contract does say that if they supplied 100 cases of oranges. However, the 100 cases of oranges that he sent were rotten. Well, there's no way in the world that judge is going to make that guy pay the $10,000. Just like in these contracts. Yeah, you breached the contract, but if you were fraudulently induced into the contract, or there was other problems with that contract, that's what puts you in the driver's seat. Anything that happened past that has nothing to do with it. I think as one 3-judge panel of an appellate federal court put it, I don't care if your loan's been securitized, pasteurized, or homogenized. Whoever ends up with the note can foreclose even if it was burglarized. So all of this nonsense that you hear that they have to own the note, there has to be a wet ink signature, there has to be this, total nonsense. They don't even need the note to foreclose. One of the analogies that I use is that, I borrow Laurie $300,000 from you. I give you a promissory note. I give you a mortgage. And then a couple of months after that, I hear you had a fire and everything burned up in the fire. Well, I listened to all this nonsense on the internet and don't pay you. You want to come to court. You want to get your money back. And you say, Your Honor, on April the 20th, 2019, I lent $300,000 to Mr. Jones. He gave me a promissory note, and he gave me a mortgage, but I had a fire and it all burned up. And then he turns and what do you think is going to happen? I mean, the judge now would turn to Mr. Jones and say, Mr. Jones, in case you don't know what the penalty is here in Florida for perjury, it's a minimum of 5 years in the penitentiary. Now, I got a couple questions for you. Did you borrow $300,000 from this nice lady sitting over here? And before you answer that, Mr. Jones, she has a canceled check with your name on it. Well, yeah, Judge, I guess I did. Did you, on the same day to memorialize that $300,000 loan, execute a promissory note in her favor? Well, yeah, Judge, guess I did. Did you also, as collateral for that $300,000 loan, execute a mortgage in her favor? Yeah, Judge, guess I did. Mr. Jones, give her the money, or I'm going to give her the house. It's that simple. That's how it works. Not that it was robo-signed, not that it didn't get into the trust. None of that stuff matters. What matters is there a problem with that contract? Because you're not going to win those other arguments because nobody has and nobody ever will.
Okay, let me clarify something, because this seems to be one of those situations where people are confusing words, or confusing terms. Let's say you go into trial, or you go into a hearing, motion to dismiss, and or you have a full out trial, and the bank puts on their case and you put on your case, and the judge decides to dismiss the case with or without prejudice, but let's just call it dismiss the case, and even tell the bank you can't come back, right? Did you win your house just then? No, you didn't.
Matter of fact, what happens is in judicial states, in a lot of judicial states, the banks hire outside law firms. They're not in-house counsel. They hire outside law firms. And what these law firms would do, they've got tons of these cases. They're trying to get them done. They go to court and they file the lawsuit without actually having the note when they filed the lawsuit. So what happens is the either the defense counsel finds out about it or the judge notices it and they dismiss the case. Okay. Problem is now the bank has the note, and before the ink's even dry on that judge's order, they're already down in the courthouse refiling the court case. Now you've already paid money to your lawyer. Now you got to come back. You still have no defenses. So what's your defense now? Because they have the note. I'll give you an example, and I remember his name because his name was Heinz Ketchup, but this lawyer from New Jersey called me, and he said, Storm, you sound exactly like the judge I had last week. And I said, what happened? He says, well, I'm before the judge, and I had evidence to show they didn't have the note when they filed the complaint. And he says, I'm before the judge, and I'm arguing to the judge. I have my motion to dismiss in front of the judge, and the judge is talking to me, but he's looking at my clients. And he says, you know what, Mr. Hines? He says, you're absolutely correct. He says, they didn't have the note. And if you want me to dismiss this case, I will dismiss this case. But here's the problem I see, Mr. Hines. And again, he reiterates the whole time he's talking to me, but looking at my clients. And he says, the problem that I see, Mr. Hines, is that they do have the note now. And he said, I looked over and here was the bank waving the note. And he said, what I see happening, Mr. Hines, is before the ink's even dry on my order, they're going to be down in the clerk's office refiling that lawsuit. You had no defense. The only defense you had was this. I don't expect you have any other defenses. So I tell you what, Mr. Hines, and again, he's looking at my clients the whole time. He says, why don't you go out in the hall and take all the time that you need to discuss this with your clients? He goes, I go out in the hallway and my clients are like, the hell with this. We've already spent all this money. You don't have any defenses to this because nobody analyzed their transaction. So we're tired of spending money. We're done. Hines says, I went back in the courtroom. He says, Your Honor, he says, I decided to withdraw our motion to dismiss. He says, the judge looked at me and said, that was a smart move, Mr. Hines.
So this is the same reason why securitization audits haven't worked, is because all of those, it didn't make it into the trust in time, or
the problem is,
I heard.
The problem, Lori, is all these securitization audits are factually and legally incorrect. Because as you recall, part of what we ask our clients to send is those audits, so we can show you where they're factually and legally incorrect. They'll say things like, well, if the note is split from the mortgage, that they can't legally foreclose on you. Not true. Every court in the country that's heard that argument said it's utter nonsense. Matter of fact, most of these, which I found incredible, it's a lot of nonsense for like 30 pages and about MERS and other kind of crap. And there'll be like one little paragraph that says, and a lot of times they'll say, we don't even know who owns the note. Well, I just got done telling you that Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac own 98% of all non-jumbo loans in the United States. They could have gone to either one of their websites and saw if their loan was there or not. So, but I'd say probably 75% of the time they can't even identify who owns it, which is a joke in and of itself. All the information is freely available on the internet. It takes them probably 10 minutes to do one of these securitization audits. It takes about 5 minutes to do a forensic loan audit. These chain of title, audits, they're all nonsense. This guy, Dave Krieger, is a convicted felon. A lot of people that get involved in this stuff are convicted felons that were scamming people in some other genre and now have come in to do this. So it's just incredible that, people can go in and continue to make arguments over and over again that the courts have said are utter nonsense.
Okay, so once you get yourself out of the, I hate the banksters are screwing everybody, yada, yada, yada arguments, which is a mindset that you allow yourself to get into, for various reasons. Okay. I mean, whether it's all the way back to the Federal Reserve's unfair and unconstitutional fake
nonsense,
and making money, out of thin air, and all of the other things, has absolutely zero to do with your particular situation, anybody's particular situation. Okay. It's a contract. All right. So, one of the other things that has happened, I'm going to go back to something you said earlier, because I have a question that someone in my group would like you to address, if you can, and that is stalling. And you expressed, you could get hung with legal fees. The deficiency that is accumulated on your mortgage by not being paid for years and years and years is going to follow you forever, and you can't write it off, and so on. Now, in certain circumstances, to settle, some people have gotten the banks to waive the deficiency, which is something you can ask them to do.
Like a short sale. Yeah.
They don't have to do it.
No.
I mean, that's their choice. But let's say you get stuck with one of these deficiencies, hundreds of thousands of dollars. And now you have no collateral because they've taken your home. And this is deficiency on top of what was the house was sold for to satisfy the loan. So is there any fight, any method to help someone overcome this deficiency issue?
Yeah, have an analysis done.
Because the same things apply. Is that what you're saying?
Absolutely.
Okay, so let's say, for example, a person has a deficiency of hundreds of thousands of dollars and their home is lost already. And they have an analysis done. And it shows that maybe something was wrong with the appraisal, which, what is it? 76% of home mortgages have appraisal problems.
Yeah, the FDIC sent their bank examiners out, and they found that 83% of the mortgages had problems and 76% of the appraisals had problems. Now, we've done 10 times what they did, and our stats are a touch higher. 90% of the mortgages are bad. 80% of the appraisals are bad. But that's what you're looking at. That's what you're looking for, these problem areas, and we know where they are. And some banks were worse than others. Not so much, and again, not so much fraudulent activity, because the bank couldn't defraud you by giving you what you asked for. But they could have been negligent writing the contract, didn't follow the statutory mandates, could be errors in the contract. They may have breached the contract. There could be all those problems with it. The fraud that you find is usually from the brokers, the title companies, and the appraisers. And a question that hasn't been asked, and I always try to address it with people, is how about the statute of limitations? Well, there's a statute of limitations on everything. However, the statute of limitations on fraud is from when you find it or should have found it. It starts to run from when you find it or should have found it. You could have got a loan in 1970 and found the fraud today, and you'd be good to go for whatever the statute of limitations is in your state, maybe 2 years, 3 years, 4 years from when you found it. As far as breach of contract, statutory regulatory mandates, and things like that, there's statute of limitations on those as well. What that means is that if you're within the statute of limitations, you can sue as a plaintiff. You can sue the bank as a plaintiff. If you're outside of the statute of limitations, you can't do that. However, if you were harmed by the bank and they're trying to foreclose on you, the law looks at it, well, they really did screw Lori. She can't sue them because she's outside of the statute of limitations, but because they screwed her, we're going to give her what she could have gotten if she sued them. It's what's known as recoupment. So there's all kinds of ways to skin the cat. You just have to, again, what's in your wallet? What happened in your transaction? That's what you have to identify. That's where the evidence is. And that's what you use against anybody that's possibly harmed you. Like in your case.
Let's talk dollars, because everybody always wants to know how much. It doesn't matter whether you're buying a car or a vacuum cleaner. Watch me get a bunch of ads on Facebook for vacuum cleaners and cars now. Okay, so what is the current rate that you charge for one of these transactions? And I showed this earlier, or one of these analysis. I showed this earlier. This is mine. Okay. And every page is full, and every bit of the information came from my own documents, but now analyzed by you guys as to what you found and what's wrong with it and why, and what agency controls that, and links to the law or the cases or whatever for you to go to and read for yourself so you understand it. So what's the going rate to have this done? And no matter, I'm just going to say this before you talk money. I watched the whole thing, and I know what's involved from your end. And I'm one of the smart people who understands that expertise costs more money. I mean, obviously, you can get your neighbor to come over and fix your pipe for $20. But if you really want it done right, or by a licensed plumber because you have to, you're going to pay, $300 or something. So expertise costs money. And also to be able to know what you're looking for and identify it and share it back to the client. So it's worth every penny from my perspective. And I'm comparing apples to oranges here by saying, I know what I've paid for audits and other things that were useless and I wasn't able to use. And it just made me angry because, you bring a securitization audit to a courtroom. Do you know what they're going to say? When they get done laughing, they're going to say, where's your expert witness to testify to what your accusations are here? And of course, you don't have one. And you don't have any documents. You just have suppositions. And all of the suppositions are post default. So it doesn't matter in the least. There's your setup. Talk about the cost, and talk about why someone should.
Well, let me ask you this question. What do you think our analysis is worth?
Every penny I paid for it.
Well, most people say they're priceless. And
Well, okay, there you go.
yeah,
And you know what? Regardless of the price, there's one thing that is priceless, and that is peace of mind that I now understand what happened, and I have proof and documentation to prove what happened, and I'm vindicated now because for 9 years I was called a deadbeat. You're just living in a house for free. You're not paying any mortgage payments, and the whole propaganda crap that the mainstream media and everybody else has put out there for years and years, including the lawyers and the judges and the whole 9 yards. So now I have peace of mind that, yeah, I may have signed something that that had I known I wouldn't have signed, but at the same time, now I know I didn't do anything wrong. I didn't do anything to deserve this.
right. Well, there's a lot of ways to answer your question. Attorneys that use us, they tell us all the time, Storm, how you guys do what you do for $5,000 is beyond us. If we knew how to do what you do, you're looking at $15,000 minimum. We had one client that took our analysis to a lawyer, and the lawyer wanted $1,000 to read it, to go through that document that we sent you. He wanted $1,000 to read it. We go through a minimum of 1,000 pages of documents of every client. You sent us well over 2,000 pages of documents, and that didn't include the online searches that we did. If anybody knows anything about the court system, if you want to get something typed up, let's say you went to a hearing and or a trial, and the trial lasted for a few days, and there was 1,000, they had to type up 1,000 pages. You're going to pay from $4 to $6 a page just to have somebody type it. Okay. We had to go, in your case, we had to go through over 2,000 pages of documents, line by line, word by word. Then we had to to elicit the evidence, then put in the court cases, the statutes, and everything else that you need as evidence to back it up, and then draw up the report, give you a template for the grievance letter, give you a list of all the government agencies to send it to, because sometimes it changes predicated upon what happened in your transaction. For an example, we just finished one, and one of they violated ECOA, and we said, okay, so what you need to do besides these government entities and state entities, you need to send a copy to the Civil Rights Division of the Justice Department and get them climbing up their behinds. So, our analysis for people, they say it's expensive. It's $5,000. If they knew that basically we lose money doing them, we lose it in a lot of ways. What the time that it takes to do it, as I tell people, you can't afford to pay us for our knowledge. You don't have enough money to pay us for our knowledge. You're basically paying us for our time. They take us about a week to do. And the other way that we basically lose money on them, as I told you, we look at these notes just from these pension funds, and they just send us the notes. That's all we look at. They pay us $500 a note. And the time it takes us to do an exam for a homeowner, which is about a week, we can analyze about 100 notes for them. That's $50,000. What do you think we'd rather be doing? And we also have our other work that we do with the litigation support side. So that kind of subsidizes mortgage fraud examiners. This was just more of a labor of love to try to, help as many people as possible, to try to educate people. As we tell people, the education's free. Pointing you in the right direction is free. Doing the analysis, we're going to charge you for our time that it took. Right. And, when we get into somebody like yours, where it's, over 2,000 pages of documents, we lost money doing it. But
well, and I know you read them, because when you said, well, look at here, compare that to that, and look at it this over here, and add that over there, and then this happened, and you're like, there's no way you just made that up. And it did take you reading and understanding everything that you were reading. So, and let me add this. You just said that the education is free. I want to thank you again. And I know I've already thanked you 100 times, but I want to thank you again for all the time that you have spent with me on the phone, educating me. Thank God. Thank God I'm not a dumb suck, because
well, you made my job. You made my job rather easy, because most people that we talk to, we only take on so many new clients a month anyway, and a lot of these people, I tell them up front, I can't help you. You believe in stuff that you're going to lose your home. I'm trying to give you the smack in the face now instead of the smack in the face you're going to get from the judge when they take your house. But they're so convinced that the judges are in the bank's pocket or some other nonsense that they go off. They hate the legal system because it's a legal system. No, it's not. You had no evidence to prove your case. And that's why you lost. And you were making stupid arguments that the courts have all said are nonsense. My personal time, I charge anywhere from $500 to $1,000 an hour. I do work annulling indictments and things like that. I've written, I had a case here just a couple of years ago that they came to me because this lawyer had been indicted for allegedly embezzling money from a trust account. And they came to me and they wanted me to see what I could do. And I wrote a brief that killed the indictment. And this guy was looking at going to jail for the rest of his life. And I wrote this brief and charged him $25,000 for it. Now, that brief only took me a few hours to write, but
oh, well, I mean,
a hell of a lot better than going to prison.
Okay, let's go like this: 25,000, rest of your life in jail.
And it was a death sentence for this guy because this lawyer was 60 and he was looking at doing about 35 years in prison.
Right.
So anyway, the toughest part is getting to people to understand that it's a breach of contract case, to look in the mirror and say, okay, I breached the contract, but there's still a way for me to get ahead in this game. You realized that early on. You understood immediately when I told you it was a breach of contract case. You stood it right off the bat. This lady today that started crying, she understood it right off the bat. Some people never understand it.
Well, you have to be deprogrammed from all of the years. People have been indoctrinated, being in groups, reading the same online articles, the same bloggers, that are popular and whatever, and the promises that are made, and oh, look at this case. Oh, how exciting, this ruling or whatever. And so you're looking for the silver bullet because all you want, you just want it to be over.
And the cases that they show you, Laurie, are not wins.
No, they're not. They're just dismissals. They're going to come back. Some other entity is going to come back. Maybe not them, but they're going to sell it. In my case, my loan was sold from 2009. I lost track of how many times my loan was sold in default. It was sold already in default, non-performing. And at the end of the day, Goldman Sachs owns my loan now, a division of.
Right.
And they bought bundles of crappy loans from Fannie Mae, and their opportunity or their opportunity to make money off of it was to get it out of foreclosure. So they offered me a modification. Okay. Their opportunity now is they have a performing loan again. Now it's going to be sold probably in no time flat, and I'm going to be dealing with somebody else again. But in essence, the difference between what we've been told as people, fighting foreclosure all these years is it's unfair what the banks are doing, selling and trading, and, they're all making money off of it and everything else. And at the end of the day, is it really any of my business what happens with that note and mortgage, as long as they don't try to take my house and I keep making my payments? Okay. That's what mortgage lending is.
That's what it's all about. And here's the thing. It's a very nice business for people who have money that want to invest. These pension funds, they can buy these notes, non-performing notes, for 30 cents on the dollar. So you have a $100,000 note, they pay $30,000 for it. Now they come to you and say, okay, Laurie, we'll do a loan mod for you for the next 5 years. All right. And you pay us $1,000 a month. So for the next 5 years, you pay $1,000 a month. You paid them $60,000. They've already made $30,000 on their original investment. Mm-hmm. And the property is still a $100,000 note. So then they come back and say, okay, Laurie, we want the $2,000 a month you're supposed to pay us. Well, I don't have it. Okay. Can you give me another loan mod? Yeah, we'll do another one for 5 years. So now they paid another. So now they've got $90,000. They're out 30. They've made $120,000 on $30,000 investment. Then that time period is up, and they're not going to do. They decide not to give you another loan mod. They foreclose on you, and they get the $100,000. So look at all the money they made.
Well, and here's the deal.
That's why pension funds and hedge funds buy them, because that's how they pay their pensioners.
Right. And the percentage of them that they can so-called clean up or get them off the, the deathbed or life support, whatever, right, and make them performing again in some way, whether that's cash for keys, short sales, deed in lieu, modification. I mean, there's all kinds of methods that the government itself has set up to utilize the banks to do this with. Okay. So yeah, it's hard for somebody who is just getting by paycheck to paycheck or year by year to be able to swallow, these guys are making money off of my destitution or my, hard luck or my problems. Well, if you had that money, you'd be looking for ways to make money off of it too. That's just the way capitalism in America works.
And they're not making money off of your destitution. They're making money off the contract that you signed,
right?
Because you said in the contract, you can sell it, assign it, transfer it, throw it in the toilet, set it on fire. You said you can do all that. It's like MERS. I've seen judges where people come into court and they say, well, Your Honor, MERS can't do this. And the judge says, excuse me? I'm looking at your contract right here where you said MERS steps into the shoes of the lender. They can sell it, assign it, transfer it, do all those types of things. And now you're going to come in my courtroom and tell me that MERS can't do that, and you agreed to it? Get out of here. Get out of my face.
And see, this is another part of the deprogramming that I'm talking about. Okay. I read all of that. I've read all the books. In 9 years, you read a lot of stuff. You investigate everything. You're looking for anything that will get you out of this problem. And so it's just like with anything else. There's gurus everywhere. And the gurus all make up these shiny stories. Come over here and do what we suggest. Okay, I'll try that. Oh, now that didn't work. And then you're wah. You walk away and you hear the loser game show music in your head. And then the next thing you know, there's another guru. Well, take our workshop and pay for our, blah, blah, and buy our book. And every single one of them is playing on your emotional and depressed state of mind. Okay. I don't know anybody that's happy being in foreclosure.
No.
Nobody. And so, here you are. Well, I'll try this and I'll try that. because after all, unless you're completely retired and have no income coming in, you're not making a house payment. Hopefully you're doing something with the money that you would have been paying into making a mortgage payment. Shouldn't you use it to try to get yourself out of this mess, or just give it up and stop bleeding and move on? I mean, there were several times when I just said, you know what, that's it. I just can't take one more phone call and one more thug knocking on my door, blah, blah. But once you deprogram that post-default bullshit defense mindset, okay, and understand that you're going to be asked at trial on the witness stand, did you stop making these payments? Did you make a payment on this month or that month or that month or any subsequent month after that? And your answer has to be no, because you can't prove you did. And so here's the thing that happened to me, that happened to a whole lot of other people. And this is where I feel like, wow, now I know I'm vindicated. Okay. I asked for a loan modification. I was told to miss 2 payments in order to apply for the HAMP modification program. That went against everything I'd ever heard. I've had a lot of mortgages in my life. I'm much older than I look. And so, like, wait, what do you mean? Missed 2 payments? Red flags went up everywhere. Well, that's how the process works. And the bank is telling you that. And then you talk to some friends or some other people that you find out are in foreclosure, and they say, yeah, they missed 2 payments and apply for the HAMP modification. And months go by and you don't have any answer from the bank. And now you're getting farther behind. And before you know it, you get foreclosed on. And you're like, wait a minute, that's not fair. I didn't know this was how you were going to play the game, or I wouldn't have applied for this stupid thing. And so there's things like that directly caused my default. Okay. To somebody to tell you to stop making payments, and you do it. And you think, well, everything's going along. Nobody's telling me, things are looking bad. You're probably not going to get a modification. So you wait and you wait and you wait. But let's just say that that didn't happen to you. Let's just say that you lost your job, or something happened and you don't have the money to make the monthly mortgage payment, and you can't borrow it from anybody, and you're screwed. There were lots of programs set up post 2008, 7, 8 crash time, the HOPE and the HAMP and the HARP and the TARP and all of that, programs for people who were having hardships to apply for these things. And that was supposed to protect you, at least while you were trying to do it, from getting foreclosed on, from getting a foreclosure filed on you. And millions of people have been in foreclosure for years because, or walked away and did the short sales and the whatever a long time ago, because of those stories and lies and misinformation and disinformation. Now, let's say you've gone through this whole thing and someone tells you that, okay, the bank is only concerned about the court is only concerned about your contract, and the default of the contract is what caused the foreclosure to be filed against you. So now, what is your only remedy left to fight back, either from a defensive position inside that case, or figure out how to get that case dropped and be the plaintiff the next time, which many people are now talking about? How does what you do help somebody in that position, looking at it from that position?
Well, there's a couple things that people need to understand. Is every court case is a question before the court. Did Laurie run the red light? Did Laurie rob the bank? Did Laurie drive drunk? That's the question before the court. In a case of foreclosure, did Laurie breach the contract? That's why we're here. In all those instances, that's why you're there, because there's a question before the court. Now, the question before the court in a foreclosure is, did you breach the contract? Nothing else. Just did you breach the contract? And you have to be able to show, because you're the bad guy in the eyes of the law, because you breached the contract. That's why it's necessary and imperative to find something wrong with the contract. Now, what I try to get people to pay attention to is court cases. What have the courts said about these arguments that you've been hearing? And I have some people that, their first answer is, oh, these courts are corrupt. And I'm like, stop. Use some common sense for a second. You say they're corrupt, but you're going to go into a court that's already said that your argument is nonsense, and you think that they're going to change their mind because you came in and said something. If they're corrupt, they're corrupt. So you're going to lose on that argument going in because they've already said it's nonsense. I've seen judges throw a homeowner out on their ear, and then the next guy come in and award a free title to the guy's house, or a bunch of money. So it's if you have to have the evidence to win your court case, you have to overcome the fact that you breached. Now, you brought up a good point. You said for 9 years, I read this, I saw this, I did this, I did this, I did this. You now have practical experience. Based on your experience with having your transaction analyzed and what you read for 9 years, what is your comment about all of the stuff you read for 9 years?
Well, now I completely understand, having been through it and tried a lot of it myself. I mean, I'm just getting slapped on the wrist right now, sending letters around to people, and my bank is sending stuff back to these agencies saying Lori Frary tried to rescind her mortgage in whatever year and blah, blah, and trying to make me look like a crazy person. And I look like a crazy person unless I defend myself against doing something crazy. And the something crazy was thinking that I could rescind what is it called? A purchase money contract?
Yeah, you can't do it.
Okay. And yeah, maybe a second mortgage or some other kind of contract, but not a first mortgage. But I was told, oh yeah, no problem. Just write this letter, send it, to everybody. And then they have to reply. And if they don't do it in 20 days, I mean, there was this whole rigmarole. And so now I'm having to do mea culpas by saying, I got bad advice. I was misinformed. Act like that never happened. I'm sorry. I apologize. Okay. And it weakens my position of trying to look like I know what I'm talking about now as compared to that screw up. Okay. So now that I understand what it is I'm fighting, Lori, did you run the red light? Lori, did you steal the oranges? Lori, did you default on your mortgage? Okay. And that's the only question before the court. Well, yes, technically I defaulted on my mortgage, but defaulting on my mortgage means I did not make the payments on time, and now I have to show the bank told me to do that. And then the bank added insult to injury. And then, hey, wait a minute. I have my mortgage transaction analyzed and look at all these other things they did. Okay. So now I have more of a preponderance of evidence that, well, okay, now we're even. I defaulted and so did you. Now you're the big bad bank and I'm just little old me, but you have all these regulatory agencies over you who told you how you're supposed to do your stuff and you didn't do it right. Okay. So at least now, I have evidence. That's the word I was looking for. That's really important. I have the evidence. I have documentation showing what they did, explained a little differently than the way I thought it was before. See, now it's a whole different, it went from like a turkey to a big gorilla over here. And so now I have confidence. Before I never had any. I was trying anything. But now I have confidence to be able to, I'm on third round, fourth round letter writing campaigns and phone calls with the banks now, finally starting to take me seriously. And at some point, either I say, okay, that's it. I'm done messing with you people. I'm going to file a lawsuit, and I'll have my day in court this time. Or you need to pony up to and correct what you've done.
Well,
that's the difference.
In actuality, in your case, as in almost every case, they were the cause of your default.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, you defaulted, but they caused it. And that's the evidence that you now have. They caused your default. As you said previously, as we outlined in your analysis, they already paid over 320 some million for doing to other people what they've done to you. There's no way that they can come back and take that out of the equation. That they got caught already doing it, and they did it to you. So
Right.
You already have your proof, besides all the other stuff that you have as proof. Again, the documents speak for themselves. Don't need an expert witness. Don't need anything. All you need is those documents. And that's what you use to win. You can continue to do the same things over again like you did for 9 years, and you're treading water. If you want to get results, you have to find out what happened in your transaction. And that evidence is what you use against the people that harmed you. That's how you win.
Well, at some point, I'm going to be able to have a grand hurrah, because I'm as dogged now about pursuing this as I have been dogged in defending myself against them trying to take my house away for something they did in the first place. And, now that I've got the modification, obviously, I don't have to worry about a trial and coming next week or next month or whatever, and continue to pay legal fees and so on. And let's face it, when I bought my house, I intended to make monthly payments. That's how mortgages work. It was never my intention to get a free house, even though that's what everybody bandies around, to people who are in foreclosure. Oh, you're just trying to get a free house. No, I'm not. I'm just trying to get a better deal by asking for a modification. It's not my fault that you guys, bungled up the entire derivatives market and everything else you screwed up in 2007 and got caught at. But now that happened, and
see, that's a misnomer too. That's all nonsense. That didn't happen. That didn't happen. Nothing that they did with derivatives or anything has anything to do with a homeowner and their breach of their contract.
No, I'm not saying that that is directly tied. What I'm saying is there was an economic depression, recession, whatever, that happened directly after that. Whether anybody wants to say it's directly tied to it or not, I'm not going to get into that battle. But people lost their jobs. Lots of people were told, the TARP and HAMP program was designed to modify everybody's house because the price of houses went down. A lot of people were underwater. My house lost about $75,000, almost $100,000 in value in like a year. And that was one of the reasons that I went to ask for the modification, because there were programs in place. Well, hey, if there's a program, I'm going to try to take advantage of it to either lower the principal balance of your house or to lower your interest rate. I was at a 7% fixed interest rate. They were offering 3.5%. Why wouldn't I go try that? It makes sense.
Yeah. Well, the problem is that what happened was it was Clinton who basically, he said everybody should be able to own a house. And so what he did is he said, look, we're going to change all these laws, because the laws used to be 30-year fixed. That was it. We're going to change all these laws. And so you guys can basically, and then they started coming up with all these exotic things where, you can get a 1% loan. And then people,
very creative.
Yeah. And then people were looking at it saying, well, wait a minute, I can buy this $1 million house at 1% loan. Well, excuse me, in 4 years, it's going to be a 7% loan. You're not going to be able to afford it. But the market keeps going up. So what I'm going to do is by then, I'm going to sell that, and then I can do this and do that. So it was all people that were getting into business deals that they shouldn't be getting into.
Well, and a lot of people were buying real estate, building a real estate rental portfolio.
Sure.
And owning multiple homes. I mean, that was a thing that a lot of people did pre bubble bursting.
I had a lady, it was funny. The lady called up and she had 20 houses and being foreclosed on all 20. And she was, these goddamn banks, MFers, blah, 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 just cussing like a sailor. And I said, well, let me ask you a question. I said, you got 20 houses. I said, you must have been making some money at one time. And then she goes, yeah. She's from 2001 to about 2005. I probably made 3 or 4 million in the real estate market. And I said, well, excuse me. How come they weren't no good MFers and son of a bitches back then when you were making money? They're only now because you got caught in a bad business deal. So, at the end of the day, that's why it's necessary and imperative to look in the mirror and say, look, I breached the contract, but I'm going to find out if they were the cause of my breach.
Right.
If somebody was, and that's what happened in yours, and that's what happens in the cases where we analyze these transactions, someone harmed you in a way that caused you to breach, whether it was appraisal fraud or whatever. Like up in West Virginia, Quicken Loans was paid Miss Brown $3.6 million, and that didn't include the $700,000 she got in a settlement for overappraising her home. So that was quite common. I mean, what they would do is the broker go to somebody who's on their approved appraiser list and say, hey, Joe, I need for you to come back with $400,000 on this property. Joe would come back and say, it's not worth $400,000. It's only worth $3 million. Hey, Joe, need I remind you that you're on our approved appraiser list, which you won't be any longer unless you give me the $400,000. Well, Joe wanted to stay on the approved appraisers list so he could keep getting business. So he'd say, nobody's going to find out about this. I'm going to say it's worth $400,000. You just bought a house that's already underwater. See, when you take out a loan, you're buying money. You bought $400,000 on something that's worth $300,000. That's insane. Nobody would do that. But the problem is nobody gets the appraisal at closing unless you specifically ask for it. So you didn't know whether they overappraised it or not. You had no idea. You had no idea your house was already underwater. Now,
all you're looking for is that magic phone call where they say, okay, looks like we're good to go. Your house appraised and your loan was approved by our investors, whoever that is that's funding it. And you're a happy camper. That's, buying a home is a financial decision. But I mean, how many people aren't emotional about it? Oh, I love this house. Oh, I gotta have this house. I've been wanting this kind of house all my life, or time to move up, or we're getting ready to have another kid. We need 4 bedrooms instead of 3.
And think about it for a second, Laurie. Think about it if they had said to you, okay, Laurie, you want this house? Oh, that's fine. Cut us a check for $300,000. You couldn't take out a loan. You had to cut a check for $300,000. It's like
you don't get to buy it.
You don't get to buy it. What if tomorrow that you had to pay what the price of the car is? You know, cars now, you can't get a car now for any less than 30 grand. So you don't get somebody to finance it. It costs you $30,000. You're not buying a new car. They're not selling cars.
Well, that's why most people are doing, you know, over time, everything changes about the system.
What's my payment going to be? That's what they want.
People are leasing more cars now because they can, you know, they don't have much of a down payment. Maybe they got a couple of grand they can throw down to drive it off the lot. And, you know, we're going to promise to take really good care of it and keep it low miles and do all that stuff so that we can turn it in when we're done. And basically we just rented this car for 3 years.
And what's everybody concerned with is, what's this house going to cost me a month? What can I get for, I can have this nice house here and it's only going to be $1,500 a month. I'm in.
Right.
Well, the bank, they loan money. You got to borrow money. You got to pay interest on the money. That's just how business is.
Well, and it's not just that, you know, look at it this way. When you buy a piece of property, that's like, you know, it's time stamped. This day, this is what it was worth. This is what the payments were, you know, whether you got it fixed or an arm or whatever it is. This is what the taxes are supposed to be. This is what the insurance is. And so you have some kind of way to budget your money to know that you can afford it going forward. And you better damn well be ready that 3 years from now, the insurance is going to be more. The taxes are probably going to be more. And so that, you know, $2,000 a month house payment that you agreed to in 3 years could likely be $2,500 or $2,700. And if your income didn't grow equivalent to that, and remember, the groceries are going up and the clothes are going, everything. Yep. And so that's why they use those algorithms to prepare people for, you know, to make sure that someone's income level will be able to afford a certain pre-approved amount of money, because there's a national standard. X amount of percentage you don't want to exceed, what is it? 36% of your annual or your monthly income for your housing. And so that was part of the problem back then, was if you could fog a mirror, you could get a loan.
Exactly.
Okay. And, you know, consumers got sucked in, just like they get sucked into everything, because
well, they had these loans, Laura.
They don't think, and they don't think ahead, and they just don't understand what they're doing.
They had these loans called pick a payment loans. Pick a payment loan. And it literally meant pick a payment. So you could make this payment this month, another different payment that month. And so what do people do? I want to make the lowest thing I can get, picking a payment. But what they didn't realize was the interest and everything else that was happening in order to pick that payment, that lower payment. So then all of a sudden
was growing like Jack and the Beanstalk in the backyard.
Or they got some arm, and the arm was 1% interest only for the first 3 years. Well, what happened was, when it wasn't the economy that brought the housing market down. It was the housing market that brought the economy down. So you had these people that got in these loans, and then all of a sudden they got foreclosed on. That brought all the houses down in that neighborhood. Then somebody else got foreclosed on, brought the houses down in the neighborhood. So now everybody's house is underwater. The person that thought, when the broker said, "Hey, Laurie, I tell you what, we'll get you out of this loan. Stick in it for a year. It's a 7% loan. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to get you out of this loan next year and get you a 5% loan." So you say, okay, I'll bite the bullet for a year and do it. Really can't afford it, because like you said, you knew the interest rate was going to go up, the taxes, the insurance, and everything go up. You really couldn't afford it, but you took it based on what the broker told you, because we'll get you out of this loan and get you down from 7% to 5%. So you bet on the come. That day never came, because everything went in the toilet, and that's how everybody got caught. So,
well, what I want to make sure of is that people that are listening to this do not think we're making excuses for the banking industry
No.
or the court system or the lawyers or anybody. We're not making excuses for anybody, including not making excuses for our own actions. Okay. But once you find yourself in a position where you are looking at something to do with the law or the court system, okay, you have to have the defenses ready to defend yourself. And so when I finally came to grips that I've been thinking about this all wrong, that I've been trying to defeat the entire system of things, okay, that has been in place. How long did you tell me they started securitizing loans?
They started securitizing loans in this country in the 1700s.
Okay, so it's not a new thing.
No.
Okay, and trusts. When did trusts start?
Trusts have been since time immemorial.
From
Came from England.
the very
Yeah.
beginning of time.
Yeah.
Okay, so trusts, securitization, and transferring documents, selling mortgage paper has been going on for time immemorial. Okay, so why keep trying to beat that dead horse? If you want to change that system, if something about it is wrong, okay, and my opinion doesn't count. It's your own opinion, the listener, that counts. If you think it's all wrong, then do something to change it. But while you're in it, fight it with the best weaponry that you can find. And if you have to sell your car or your furniture or your your husband to raise the money to find out for yourself and to get a way to defend yourself, then do it. Because I don't know about you, but my home is my biggest financial investment. I mean, I bought it in 2007. And I immediately turned around and put $65,000 into it to fix it up. New kitchen, new bathrooms, real money, my own money, and purposefully made a low down payment so that I, could afford to keep the house, pay the payments, make these, improvements, and have a nice home when I'm done. And then turn around and fight for 9 years to keep it. So it's my biggest investment. And if you can put yourself in that position instead of listening to gurus out there telling you, oh, we're making great strides in this securitization audit department, or we're look at this one case that got dismissed with prejudice because somebody screwed up some paperwork or didn't record something, or whatever the case may be. Believe me, those are one-offs. They're absolutely one-offs. But getting a case dismissed does not mean you won your house. I've been foreclosed on twice. The first one brought the case, worked on me for 4 years, dismissed the case, and then 6 months later, a new entity brings it back. So once you're in default, the magic word, once you're in default, that's the only defense that you have is see if you can find where they defaulted.
And Lori, you brought up an interesting point. And I talk to people all the time, and they'll say, well, $5,000, I don't have $5,000. And I say, excuse me, you got a $2,000 a month mortgage payment. And you haven't made a mortgage payment for 4 years. That's $100,000. How come you have no money? And the real answer is that they still have all of this crap in their head, and they're believing the crap. When I go give talks on my radio show and I talk to people about it, I tell people, I say, look, the first thing you're going to get from me is a cranial enema. because I got to get all the crap out of your head
Right.
before you're going to understand what really works. And the key is again, read the court cases, go to our website. There's a library there. Read the court cases and what the courts have said about these arguments out there. You're not going to win. You may stall, but you're not going to win. And again, as we discussed, stalling's not a good thing. So the key is, if you're not going to, if you do a deed in lieu of foreclosure, do a short sale, you're out of your house. If you want to keep your house, if it's necessary and imperative for your kids or whatever the case may be, or the amount that you invested like you did, that you want to keep the house, the only thing that works is analyzing that transaction to see what evidence is there to use. And anybody tells you any different, they're lying to you. Get them on the phone. I'll tell them to their face.
Well, again, I mean, look at this. Okay. I didn't think nobody's going to be able to focus in on anything, but these are my own documents telling me what was found and what was wrong and who did what and why and what to do about it. And I could have spent, look at all the books I read and look at all of the, blogs and the gurus and the lawyers I listened to and so on and so forth. And the time that I spent 9 years trying to learn all this stuff, all this wrong stuff. Okay. It only took me, let's see, I read my analysis my analysis 3 times over, printed it out. Then I also got the PDF form of it, and there's hot links in there that will take you to, what they're talking about, describing to you, whether it's a statute or a court case or whatever. And you can go and read that. And in about the course of a week, I went 180 degrees in the opposite direction from what I thought I was dealing with before to what I understand I'm dealing with now. And believe me, I was pretty beat up because I was trying to negotiate a modification at the same time I'm going through this. And I was pretty mentally beat up. I mean, my head was full. And but I persevered. And, like I said, Storm doesn't charge you to get you to understand what it is that you've got. Okay. It's like going to school. You get a textbook, and many people think, why do I have to sit here in class with the textbook when I could just take the textbook home and read it and understand it myself? Why do I have to listen to lectures and so on? Because maybe if you're one of the fortunate people who can understand something pretty easily, read and understand and comprehend English well, that's one thing. But nobody understands legal mumbo jumbo. After about 5 minutes, your eyes roll back in your head and you start having Whistle and Dixie going off in your head, and you're ready to go watch a movie or something instead. So when I finally really came to grips and talked to Storm about different things, and even got to the point a couple of times where I'm like, I can't even write this grievance letter right. It's either sounds like, mumbo jumbo, or it's not good enough. I'm not saying enough, or something's wrong here. And please write the grievance letter. And Storm says, you can't pay me $50,000 to write that grievance letter. Why? I mean, at this point, I'm almost willing to do that. And it's because if you don't understand it enough to write it, then how are you going to understand enough to argue it? Because you very well will be doing that when you start talking to banks and legal departments and whoever else and agencies. You got to know what you're talking about. And if you don't understand it well enough to write the letter, then you don't understand it well enough to go forward. So you might as well just forget about it. And that was enough. I got through it, and I wrote it and sent it off, and I've gotten action. Now, have I gotten what I want yet? No, because I don't know what I want yet, but I know I want somebody to, admit that they wronged me, they harmed me, and compensate me for that. And so I won't stop until they do.
And the nice thing about it, Laurie, in your situation is you have the bank in a double bind because you have evidence to show that they did to you what they did to all these other people and had to cough up $320 million. So there's the double bind for them is they can't get out of that. They can't get out of that fact. And they're going to have to do something about that because now you've thrown it up in their face and said, you need to do something about it. You've told these government agencies, you've told your congressmen and senators, you've told anybody that's willing to listen, which they all are willing to listen, the attorney generals, to everybody, that, look, these guys wrong me and I need to be compensated for it. Now, then it comes down to, what are you looking for? I'll give you a quick little story real quick. We had a guy out in the Midwest, I don't know, he's Idaho or Iowa or one of those places, and he called us up and he goes, damn, Storm, he said, you're not going to believe what I just got back from the grievance letter. I said, what? Well, the bank offered to give us $75,000 cash, knock our interest rate down. It was somewhere around 7%, down to 3% for the life of the loan, and forgive the arrearage. He goes, I am so damn excited. He goes, I'm going to hire the Goodyear blimp and put your company's name on it. And so I said to him, well, obviously you didn't understand the grievance letter. And it's, come on, Storm. He says, I had to understand the grievance letter, the analysis to write the grievance letter. And I said, well, you obviously didn't read all the cases, because there's a case in there, a couple of cases in there, same bank, that did the same things to other people, only your case was better because they harmed you more and they got millions. Now, you got a choice to make. You could take what you have, or you could go after the millions. Now, but I'm going to warn you about something. You got something now. You might give that up to hire some hack that has no idea what he's doing, doesn't know how to get evidence in, doesn't know how to argue things. You end up losing and end up with nothing. So think long and legal fees. And legal fees. You might want to think long and hard before you call us back a couple of days later, said, I'm taking what I got. So smart move. So, I tell people all the time, look, if you think that you're going to get $10 million and the president of the bank to kiss your ass on the Capitol steps, it ain't happening. Right. So you better come up with something that makes sense, that's logical, that you're willing to accept for, 9 years of the horror that you went through. And for everybody, it's going to be different. And, but the key is, again, you have the evidence for them to make an offer to you. And that's the key. Again, it's the evidence, not conjecture. It is absolute, unequivocal evidence that they can't get around. That's the key.
And at the end of the day, here's the difference. Going in and arguing what some trust did, or what MERS did, or what some robo-signer did, or whatever. I'm arguing about what my very own bank did. Okay. And that's a whole lot different than this air of, it's kind of like throwing darts at the wall and none of them actually hit the dartboard, with these other arguments. And I want an end to it. I want them to go away and not come back. Okay. And the only way that that's going to happen is we're going to have to come to some kind of an agreement, because even though I have a modification right now, it's better than I started with, but it could be improved on. I mean, I signed a 40-year mortgage in order to get a modification that had a price that was acceptable. Now, back to that I look younger than I am thing. I'm not going to be an octet or a, what is it, centenarian or whatever it is, paying mortgage payments on my house. And so, do I have room for improvement? Absolutely. But the position that I'm in at this point is I want to be compensated for them foreclosing on me while I'm trying to get a HAMP mod and other things. But that's what was one of the most critical things, because had that not happened, I wouldn't have spent the last 9 years in foreclosure, period. And, when you look at and you read your own contract, that's something that nobody likes to do because it's boring and they don't understand. It's like trying to read, an insurance binder. But when you actually do read it and you understand what you have signed, you can see where they covered themselves 10 ways from Sunday in all these different paragraph 20 and paragraph 16 and whatever it is, because you're not their first mortgage and they're not your first bank. And this has been going on for centuries, and they know how to cover themselves. And so at the same time, though, all these think how many people are involved in a mortgage transaction. You've got the appraiser, you've got the title company. They have certain documents, HUD statements, and so on that they have to prepare. You've got the loan originating loan officer who sat down and had you fill out the application and ask you questions and had you submit documents and so on. The closing agent, there's the real estate agent, both the broker, the buyer's broker and the seller's broker. There's a lot of people involved here. The chances of somebody not making mistakes is pretty slim, actually, which is why there's such a high percentage. What did you say? The 80, 90%?
Yeah. And you've got all of these different people that don't get paid unless there's a loan.
Right.
Real estate agents,
right.
The bank
mortgage lenders.
Brokers.
Right.
Banks don't make interest on the money. There's no title company, no title insurance. So people will do things in order to get paid.
So whether or not they printed that money out of thin air or not makes no difference to your wet ink signature on a noted mortgage.
That's another laughable argument where people say, well, the bank never lent me any money. Well, here's somebody gets a cash out refinance. And excuse me, if they never lent you any money and you took a cash out refinance, would they give you seashells? No, they gave you cash that you spent.
Well, they gave somebody money. Okay?
Exactly.
I mean, somebody didn't just hand you the keys to their house.
If they didn't get paid money.
If they didn't get paid money, if they didn't get a check in their bank account. Okay.
And I've had some of these
and all the people, all the chicken hawk vulture feeders sitting around that closing table, they all got paid money.
Exactly.
Okay? And so a lot of money changed hands that day. And somebody went out and got a new outfit, and somebody went out and, bought dinner and so on. So that's that. I mean, either money's real or it's not real. Okay. If we're going to go with it's not real, then okay, then we're all living in the matrix anyway. But if it is real, because we've accepted it as a national standard that it's real, that's what those contracts are based on. So
you brought up an interesting comment about nobody reads the contract. That includes the bank's lawyers, and that includes your own lawyer have never read your contract. That's how I know that all these so-called foreclosure defense attorneys have committed malpractice. It's a breach of contract case, and they never read your contract.
Right.
So that's malpractice.
To me, that was one of the first things that you said to me that just made me go. I mean, I had a gong go off in my head. I've had how many? 1, 2, 3, 4, 4 or 5 different attorneys, and I haven't changed them that much compared to a lot of people. And not one of them during the whole time, 9 years, ever asked to read my mortgage contract or my mortgage documents. Not
And
one.
the other way that they're committing malpractice is, as you know, in every one of these contracts, it calls for you to send the grievance letter outlining the problem so they could take corrective action. The same paragraph is very clear. You cannot file a lawsuit and or a counterclaim unless you've sent the grievance letter.
Right.
And
as a matter of fact, tell about the case where somebody just got their case thrown out because they didn't.
More than that is, I was on a radio show, not my own, but a different one, and I kind of let the cat out of the bag about this was a seminar that I gave, and in the seminar, I thought we're all so-called foreclosure defense attorneys, but it turns out one of them was a bank attorney. How do I know this? Because in there, I was talking about to the lawyers. I said, look, you're committing malpractice because you have to file the grievance letter before you can file a lawsuit. And about 2 months after that, in Florida, I think it was Wells Fargo. Can't recall. I can look it up. But the homeowner came in suing the bank. Bunch of stupid arguments, but they were suing the bank nonetheless. And the bank came in and said, Your Honor, you need to dismiss this case. There's a condition precedent. They didn't follow it. They never gave us an opportunity to cure. You need to dismiss the case. And he did. And then I thought, oh my God, I said, I hope this doesn't get around. And I didn't see any more cases after that. But just in the last couple of months in 2 different states, I've seen banks making that argument. So it's getting around now.
Well, okay. So this was one of the things that made me understand this grievance letter concept. Okay. As I'm reading my own mortgage contract, I read a clause that says, from time to time, the bank gets audited by agencies or, just random or periodic audits, and we have to, cough up documents or.
Well, what they actually do, Laurie, is they come in, these bank examiners come in and they say, okay, lock the door. And they have them lock the door and they say, look, we want to see all your books. We want to see everything.
Right. Okay.
And so they have
and
the ability to do it.
And that clause in there says you agree to cooperate with any such audit and at no cost to you, but you have to agree that, if they want to ask you questions or if they need a document or whatever it is, you're agreeing to cooperate.
And the reason why that's there, Laurie, is I'm the bank president, you're a friend of mine, and you come in. They want to make damn sure that I didn't give you some deal that I shouldn't be giving you.
Right.
And so that's why they want to talk to you and say, okay, hey, you got this loan. Storm gave you this loan, and we want to see all the documentation. We want to see what you gave the bank. We want to see everything because we want to make sure that the bank is not committing bank fraud.
All right. So this clause says that way we can take corrective action. Okay. And then the flip side of that is, if you find something wrong, you have to give us the opportunity to take corrective action first. And
that's what they do.
It's stated right in there.
Yeah, the contract is they need to give you an opportunity to take corrective action. That's what the notice of default does. Mm-hmm. Laurie, if you don't pay us the money that you owe us, we're going to foreclose on you. That's your opportunity to take corrective action. Now, in turn, if you find something wrong with the contract, you have to give them an opportunity to take corrective action. And you do that by what they've defined as a grievance letter in the contract, by writing out the problems in the grievance letter and sending them off to the bank to give them the opportunity to fix it, which they can't do because the damage has already been done.
Right.
But that's
9 years worth in my case.
Yes.
So, Okay. So before we're done, I want you to speak generically about what you're doing with student loans.
Well, just last week alone, I saw 3 different news programs where 3 different attorneys came on and different channels, and they were talking about this student loan debacle where there's the figures there. I don't think anybody knows the real figures, but anywhere between 1.5 and 1.7 trillion with a T in student loans. And all the lawyers were saying, this could be something that could really harm the economy. It's worse than the mortgage situation that we faced. But the problem with student loans are they can garnish your IRS refund. They could take your Social Security. You can't bankrupt student loans. And they went through all these things that they could do. And I'm sitting there and I'm saying, well, we're just getting ready to build the website. Your associate is going to do that for us. You did a great job doing our website. And we're just going to very simply put on the website that, look, there are attorneys, including bankruptcy attorneys, that will tell you that you can't bankrupt student loans. They're right, but we know how. And so there's all kinds of ways, and that's what we've always been, I guess, our expertise is finding ways to win. And we have found ways. Now, certain indicia have to be followed, to bankrupt a student loan. But yes, you can do it. And there's a lot of other things that you can do too. I still have people tell me to this day that you can't bankrupt taxes. Well, we've been showing law firms how to do it for, going on 40 years. We used to do a lot of tax work. So there's all kinds of ways to do things. Again, certain indicia has to be followed in order to do it, but there's always ways to do things.
Okay.
And that's what you got to figure out.
All right. So people here was one of the questions that I had for you. When I got this modification, part of the deal was you may be required to pay, be affected by on your taxes by the amount that we're going to write off. Now, I don't remember how they worded it, but basically that was what it was. And it was going to be a deal killer for me because I wasn't going to let this, deficiency follow me around forever and insult me with 40-year mortgage.
Right.
So there's always a way around. And with these people who have deficiency judgments against them on their lost homes, I mean, they've already lost. Okay. So they don't have anything to utilize
some
as
of them,
leverage.
Yes, some of them can bankrupt it, but the problem is a lot of these hacks that were representing these homeowners in order to stall longer, they say, look, here's the deal, file bankruptcy. Mm-hmm. And that way you can stall it. It'll take them 60, 90 days to get the motion to lift stay and that kind of stuff. Well, they filed the bankruptcy. Well, now they can't bankrupt the deficiency judgment, or they can't bankrupt the legal fees because some hack that had no idea what he was doing lied to him or was incompetent and didn't know what the hell he was talking about.
Mostly that.
Yeah. But you can bankrupt stuff, but the key is if you already filed bankruptcy and you can't open it back up and there's other things that you can't get done, again, their best bet is if they're facing getting their wages garnished or whatever the case may be, their best bet is to have an analysis done and now be in the power position themselves. It's like I've told people for years, a loan modification is basically a synonym for begging. Number one, they don't have to give you one. Nobody can force them to give you one. And lots of times in these loan modification agreements, which they didn't do in yours, which is good, they have an indemnity clause in there that says that if we give you this, you can never go after us.
Mhm.
So sometimes those are in there. But loan modification, sometimes there's traps there. We did a press release on it years ago about the criminal trap in loan modifications. And the criminal trap is, you wanted to get the loan from the bank. It's like a resume. You want to get a loan, you want to get a job. So you want it to look the best. And now 3 or 4 years after the fact, you now want a loan mod. So you don't want it to look that good. So you get the loan mod, but you got the same job. And, here you were, you're a neurosurgeon in 2005. And now 3 years later, you're still a neurosurgeon. You were making $1 million a year in 2005. Now you're a neurosurgeon. You're making $100,000 a year. So you have to fill out a new financial statement under the penalties of perjury and everything else. Now they look at what you filed when you got the loan, and now they're looking at your loan modification. All of a sudden, one day, you got a knock on the door from somebody you don't want to knock on the door from, and it's usually an alphabet agency like the IRS or the FBI. So you had to be careful with stuff like that. But there's always ways to do things, and that's what we try to do, is engineer your case for your benefit. So
Right.
you're in the power position where people are dealing on your terms. You're not dealing on their terms. They're dictating to you when there's a loan mod. You're dictating to them when there's a settlement. Because
Well, there's an old racist a saying called a Mexican standoff. And when you get to the point where, you did this, well, you did that. Well, you did this, well, you did that. Well, at least now you both got guns pointing at each other. Okay. And that's a lot different than being in a position where, you're hunkered down in the corner behind some attorney who telling you, I'm not very confident about this. I don't think this is a winnable case.
well, it's not winnable because he has no evidence. And see, the difference,
no defense.
The only thing they can point against you is Laurie, you breached the contract, but you come back and you say, you caused me to breach the contract, and here's the proof.
Right. And there's multiple ways in my case that they caused me to breach the contract. One of them, is telling you that you don't have to make payments while you're filling out some forms.
Which is a lie.
The second thing, obviously a lie. And the second thing is once you stop making your payments, what happens? Your escrow insurance payment goes into default. Your tax payment escrowed goes into default. Now you're defaulted multiple ways, okay? Any of which are in the contract that says we can foreclose on you if you do any of these. Yep. And they're all inextricably tied to one another. And so, then they force place insurance on you and at some exorbitant rate, and which many banks have gotten in trouble for. And then that ends up, adding on to that pile at the end called your deficiency. And so at the end of the day, the only way that you can truly get yourself out of this mess, winning and losing are sort of subjective.
And you just made me think of another point you just brought up, is that people need to understand, to show you how contractually bound you are, is the promissory note is nothing more than a IOU. That's why only you have to sign it, because you're the person to be charged. The bank doesn't have to sign. You're basically saying, I owe you this money. This is how I'm going to pay you. The mortgage never comes into effect unless you breach the promissory note, because the mortgage is the collateral for the money that they lent you. And you look at it, if you look at it that way, and there are two documents that form one contract. And so when you understand that part of it, here's the IOU part. As long as I'm making the payments, everything's hunky dory. If I don't make payments, then the other part of the contract, the mortgage kicks in. That's why mortgages, and that's the collateral for the money. That's why mortgages or deeds of trust, depending upon the state that you're in, but that's why they have to have a legal description. Because in Florida, you have a lot of different counties, a lot of different little cities and things like that, where there may be 100 number 10 main streets in the state of Florida.
Right.
Well, if all you put down as collateral on the mortgage is number 10 Main Street, the bank's like, which number 10 Main Street are you by contractually telling me I can take? That's why there's a legal description.
Right.
Northwest corner by so-and-so.
This and this, yeah.
So they know
southeast corner of that. Right.
That's what they can take. So that just goes to show, again, you said, if I breach this, this is the property that you could take. Now, we've had a couple cases where they screwed up the legal description. And we had one where somebody had, on the same day, they bought a townhouse, or I can't remember, it was a condo and a single family home, or a townhouse, a single family. It really doesn't matter. But the title company got the mortgages mixed up. So they had the legal description for the single family home as the townhouse and vice versa. Well, what happens in that situation is the bank tries to reform the contract. But if you file bankruptcy, they can't reform the contract. These people ended up getting both houses free and clear.
Oh, boy.
We had one in Massachusetts where the title company screwed up, and this guy had spent $60,000 in forensic loan audits, loan modifications. He joined some group to charge him a bunch of money, a couple different lawyers, all these different scammers. And to show that not one of them read the contract is, we found a ton of stuff wrong with the analysis. This guy had been out of his house, by the way, for 2.5 years. One of the things that we found in the analysis was that proved that we know none of those 5 or 6 entities ever looked at his contract was, this guy's in Massachusetts. The legal description for the property was in Florida. Now, contractually, he said, you have to take the property in Florida. Well, they took the property in Massachusetts. This guy's going to get millions.
Well, see, here's this, this brings me back to, all right, you went to the closing, you signed a bunch of stuff, you kind of read it before, even if you really did read it, then when they sent it to you a week before closing, in many cases, people don't even have time for that. They're like, oh, we need to hurry up the closing because these people, it's like a hot market or something. And so you can look at something 5 times, and once it imprints in your head, it just looks the same every time. And it's the same wrong every time. But you didn't notice it the first time. So by the 5th time you look at it, it's the same as it was the first. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And so if you don't know what you're looking for, we could go point by point, every single thing you guys look for, and it wouldn't help anybody really. Maybe somebody, knew what to look for in their, property description, for example, but other things that are, missing in documents where somebody didn't even fill it out or plugged in some wrong numbers or, any kind of thing. Think about a person who was writing, maybe let's just play like we are loan officer at ABC Bank in, 2007 or 8. And we're processing maybe, anywhere from 30 to 100 mortgages a week, just me. And you got all this different documents and all these different people and all these different things coming in, oh, I need your last 3 years tax returns, or, oh, I need your P&L, or and things can get messed up. Okay. So don't think that, these guys are infallible, because that's one thing. But second of all, they get paid the more of these mortgages they wrote. Right. Whatever.
Well, they were just getting them in the door and getting them out. So they just get them in there, and they just say, that's what robo-signing was. Robo-signing was somebody was supposed to have read your file and signed off on it. They didn't read your file. Okay. How in the world do you think that you're going to win your case by just because nobody read your file? I mean, it's, there's stupid arguments. But to give you an idea, we had a case in California where, and this is why you have to, you got to drill down so much on these things. We had a case where in California, not only do you have to have, if you're a broker,
it's a non-judicial state in California, state. Right? Okay.
Yeah. You have to, in order, you have a license to be a broker, and you have a license to be a broker on number 10 Main Street. If you go and open an office at 123 State Street, you have to get a separate license. Okay. Now, what we found in doing this person's transaction, and we found that what they did was they didn't get a license for 112 Main Street, and they're sending documents out of 12 Main Street, and it voided the deed. But we drilled down that far. And even their lawyer was like, that was so, his exact words was, that was slick as shit. There's no way anybody could ever have caught that in a million years. And you guys nailed that.
Okay.
How the hell?
There you go.
But that's what we do. We're looking for, we're turning over every rock, every stick, everything. That's why we say, the more that you give us, the more of an opportunity that we have to discover something to help you win your case. We don't win cases. Our analysis doesn't win cases. We don't save houses. It's like the person who thought they had a problem went and got an MRI, and they found cancer at an earliest stage. It wasn't the people who did the MRI that saved your life. It was you that saved your life by getting the MRI done.
Right.
I tell people, we don't save houses. It was you making the decision to get the analysis done that gave you the evidence to save your house.
Well, and I have to say, in my case, I mean, I had no idea, even though you had talked to me before and, told me on a cursory level some of the things that you guys look for. And, but I had no idea that until I sat down and read that the HAMP-MOD program rules and regulations, that you couldn't foreclose on somebody while they were in application process.
Nope.
And until I read it with my own eyes, I'm like, I mean, it was almost like a cartoon where it goes, whoa, whoa, like that. And you go, oh my God, there it is. It's right there. They did that. Okay. And so it changes everything. And when you get on the phone with some of these bank representative people, executive services, this person or whoever, and you throw that down and you go, and you did that. And I had one the other day go, we did that? Yeah, you did that. And then I said,
and here's the proof.
You need, and I have the evidence to prove that you did. I have all of the mailings that you sent to me back and forth, the things that I supplied and the things that you supplied. And you foreclosed on me in February, and you didn't deny my modification application until July. Hello? March, April, May, June, July. You foreclosed on me 5 months before you ever denied my modification or accepted either one. But I'm in limbo while that's happening. Okay. And And they and I said, your bank wrote the contract. Your bank foreclosed on me. Now I'm willing to understand that you have a legal department over here in another building, and you have, the modification, little typing people over here, and you got the mail room, and yeah, I get that. Okay. But that's your job to coordinate it. And as a matter of fact, that's why you paid a $320 million fine, because you did that. As a matter of fact, I read an article that said there were so many papers of piles of modifications piling up that the floor gave way in the storage room that you never got to in time. Tons of paper, right?
And that was the problem, Lori, because
you sure were in a big hurry to foreclose on me, weren't you?
Yeah, and that was the problem from the get-go with all the mortgages, because back in the day, after they changed those laws, you had millions and millions of people getting loans, and the banks weren't prepared for all this paperwork coming in. So these people are like, "Holy, we got to get this thing. We got to get these things out the door. Let's just go ahead. Hey, sign off on that. Get it out. Get it out. Get it out."
Right.
Well, the same thing happened when people started getting loan modifications. They were going to malls, having job fairs to hire people to do loan mods. And then they're bringing people in, and all of a sudden, one day somebody has 100 loan mods put on their desk. Hey, you got to work on these loan mods here. And then somebody else has got 100 of them. And they were just overwhelmed. And that's
and then they were like, I think it's time for me to clock out for this evening. And we're going to leave this for the next shift, right? And then on top of that, oops, that whole pile fell in the trash can by accident.
Right.
And we lost the paperwork. You need to submit it again. And this is why the months go by. Okay. And you're told at the beginning, well, it's only going to take a few weeks if you supply us all the paperwork that we ask for, and, and blah, blah. But it's not taking weeks, it's taking months. And so, you go to the bank and you say, listen, I'm now 3 months behind on my payments. What's taking so long? This could throw me into a real hardship to try to catch up, because now you're going to charge me with penalties and interest and whatever other crap you can come up with. I mean, there's a reason why Bank of America and the top 4-6 banks in the United States, much less the world, make billions of dollars a year. Okay. There's a reason they do that. And it's not because, they're doing everything right. It's just when they do things wrong and nobody catches it, they get away with it. Okay. Yep. Well, and so it's like, now it's my mission to just have everybody go look at your documents and go look for stuff. And if you even remotely have a problem, then have somebody like Storm. There's nobody else.
There's nobody else that does what we do.
Analyze it. And, maybe if you came up with some kind of short form analysis, that, there's only so many hours in the day that you can work, but maybe if there was some kind of short form analysis you could do for a quick look, I don't know.
Well, we talked about that, and we thought that maybe what we could do is, for some people, is they take us a week to do minimum. And we even thought that, okay, well, what we could do is we could offer, send us all of your documents, your 2,000 pages of documents. And then what we'll do is we'll spend one day for $1,000, and we'll see if something jumps out at us.
Right.
And then if something jumps out at us, then we can say, okay, we can do a full.
It's worth doing a full analysis now.
Or
right.
This one day we couldn't find something to help you.
Right.
You make.
But that way, people who truly are in financial trouble and still willing to try to fight it out at the end, might be able to, take a one-shot deal to see if you could find something glaring or you know what you're looking for. You can find stuff. You found stuff on mine that, you called me back the very first day. Oh, yeah. We've already found stuff.
Yeah. Well, you brought up a good point the other day. You were saying that, look, people can find a way to pay for an analysis. If they,
Yeah, I told
if
you the
you're,
story. I mean, I wanted to open a hair salon way back in the 80s, and it was going to cost $8,000 to buy the beauty shop chairs and the first, last month's rent and paint the walls and buy some stock and blah blah. $8,000. That was pretty cheap way back then to open a business, and I didn't have $8,000. So but I did have kind of nice vintage Corvette that I took to the dealership, and I said, give me $8,000 for this Corvette right now. Give me cash. Here's the title. I'll walk away. And that's what I did. And I took the $8,000 and I opened the business. And, I rented an apartment down the street because fortunately it was downtown, so I could walk. So I walked back and forth to work for 6 months. And 6 months later, with the profits that I was already making, I went and bought me another Corvette, just like the one I had to sell. So sometimes you have to, make a sacrifice.
Well, and as you know, we only, because of all the other work that we do with now starting the student loans as well, like right now, we only have 5 spots left until June.
Right.
Because when people find out we have spots, they jump on them. But people that are interested in saving their homes, they don't qualify with us.
Right.
You have to be committed to saving your home. If you're committed to saving your home, you'll spend the time and the effort and the money to get an analysis done. But you got to be committed.
Let me be honest. I have to agree with you. You have to be committed, because it's one thing to, stand around your freaking computer scanner, scanning all of these piles of paper that you have. And, maybe you don't have 2,000 documents. That was 9 years worth of 2 court cases and all the mailings back and forth and 5 different servicers and yada, yada. A lot of it was just senseless and useless. But at the same time, even if you're talking 500-600 documents, yeah, you're going to have to scan them because you're going to have to organize them. And you're going to have to dig them out of the box to do that. And so that's going to take some time. And then you're going to have to put them in a Dropbox or email them or something to Storm. And then you're going to get an analysis, which you're going to have to read and understand. And then you're going to have to sit down and write a grievance letter outlining all of the things that they found. And you're going to have to send those to all of the entities. It may be one bank. It may be 5 different banks. It may be, an appraiser company. It may be, 5 different entities. Write the letters, and then you're going to have to follow up. You're going to have to notify some agencies so that these entities start getting some agency, pushback. And then you're probably going to have to write 2 or 3 layers of letters back and forth with these people, because I guarantee it, the first time they're going to say, thank you for your letter. But we sold that loan and so down the trail owns it now. And we're, we can't help you. And then you go, oh, wait a minute. Oh, wait just a minute. Oh, yes, you do. You're going to be helping me. And so this takes time and energy and willpower. And so you have to be committed or just forget it.
And if
go ahead and buy a mobile home or a, RV, or move out and into somebody's extra room or whatever it's going to take for you to have a roof over your head, and just move on and forget it.
Well, why don't we do this, Laura? It's getting late in the day.
Okay.
If anybody has any questions, I'm more than happy to answer them for them. And then hopefully, I've supplied enough information for everybody. You've done a great job explaining things as well. So, if anybody has any questions, I'm more than happy to try to answer them for them. If they'd like to call us, I'm sure, they can get the information from you.
If you can give me whatever phone number you'd like for me to put on this, the description on this podcast, because it will go out public and, it'll archive and so on. Otherwise, go to mortgagefraudexaminers.com and pour over their website, read, look. There's all kinds of cases and stories and different people have written testimonials and so on. And then give Storm a call, and he will talk to you, and he will at least find out a cursory, amount of information from you to know how to help, and he will. And so,
yeah, because you may or may not qualify for us to do the exam, because I mean, we have people like yourself that understood it immediately and said, I want to get an exam done. Those are the ones that take a spot.
right.
If somebody's just going to call up, they're just interested in saving their house, they're basically wasting their time and wasting our time. You
Right.
have to be committed to saving your house. And
Right.
then you qualify to talk to us, and then we still may not take your case. I've probably over the years turned down, I don't know, 5,000 people didn't take their case.
Yeah, because it just wasn't gonna.
Well, you could tell they'd be a bad client. They wanted to argue with you. Well, I got
Right.
$100 million in a treasury account, my social security numbers, the account number, and all this other nonsense. Well, you can't help.
Well, you know what?
balloons.
It's like this, Storm. Maybe somebody would look at you and say, do you, don't you maybe come off as a little braggadocious or a little intimidating or a little whatever? Okay. That's never been an issue with me. It ain't bragging if you've done it. And
Well, no, the word I get all the time, I had a guy the other day said, "You're an arrogant fuck."
oh, there you went. You went and used it.
And I said,
yeah,
and
okay.
I said, it's not being arrogant.
It's
I'm just
being
trying,
confident.
I'm being the guy who's smacking you in the face before the judge does.
Yeah.
Because
and there you go.
You want to get it from me, not from the judge. And let me tell you something, and you'll attest to this. I was on your ass from hell to breakfast about doing the grievance letter right.
Yeah,
I said, you got to do this right.
Yeah.
And
you only got one chance to do it right the first time.
Yeah, do it right. And I'm not going to write it for you, but I'll guide you and make sure that you do it right. And you did it right. And now you're starting to get some results from it.
Okay. We have a question.
Okay.
That came into the chat. And it's from Jennifer.
Okay.
Hi, Jennifer.
Hi, Jennifer.
Can we attach these issues from our analysis to a Liz Pendens to bring them to the table, referencing the complaint numbers with the different agencies? Can any of these issues of fraud be used against the law firms who submit them to the court?
Well, it depends on what the fraud issue is. And you don't even have to do that. All you have to do is take that grievance letter and make sure that grievance letter goes to the proper parties. The first two parties it has to go to in Florida is the bank, obviously, and the law firm. And the reason why you send it to the law firm is because you're putting them on notice that there's problems with the contract. So if they foreclose on you, knowing there was problems with the contract, they could be a party defendant in any lawsuit that you sued them on. In non-judicial states where you have to serve the trustee and the bank, many times the trustee has gone back to the bank and said, look, you better settle with these people or we're resigning as trustees. We're not going to get sued because you wanted to continue having us foreclose on the property.
Okay, so can we attach these issues from our analysis to a Liz Pendens to bring them to the table, referencing the complaint numbers with the different agencies? Okay, and then can any of these issues of fraud be used against the law firms who submit them to the court? Okay.
Just have Jennifer give me a call. I can, basically discuss that with her. But no, doing a Liz Pendens and putting the numbers from the different agencies is not helpful. What's helpful is doing what you did. Is here's what you people did, and by the way, I have the evidence to prove it.
Right.
And
yeah, it's just going to take a little longer. You can't get disappointed and get deflated when they send you responses that say, well, you know, we sold that a long time ago and we don't have anything to do with that. And, you know,
And what
you
they're
need
going,
to contact your current servicer if you have any questions. Well, yeah, that's what I heard. That's what I
and what
got.
they're
And
going to do to people that have put a bunch of nonsense in and gone to court with a bunch of nonsense and sent them a bunch of nonsense, they're going to use it against you.
yeah,
And like they tried to do with you, but
right.
you sidestep that issue and say, look, that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about the evidence that I have to prove this is how you harmed me.
Right.
Now
Well,
we
I
can do
mean,
it the
it's like
easy way or the
anything.
hard way.
It's like bully fights in the yard when you're a kid in third grade and somebody, you know, says yo mama. Well, this ain't about my mama. It's about you and me right here. Okay, right now. And so I'm undaunted by that. I expect them to have that kind of a first round response to anything, and second and third round. But the last phone call that I got, you know, where I actually talked to someone and said, take notes here, and said, I have the documents to prove what I'm talking about. I'm sure since they're your documents that you have them also. So maybe you need to go and look at your documents and find what I'm talking about, and then come back and talk to me.
And the key is again, see, they came back at you and they get this letter from you. And wait a minute, this is this kook Laurie again.
Mm-hmm.
And she's got more kooky stuff here. They may not even read it the first go around because you've sent stuff before that was nonsense. But then that's why you come back and say, hey, wait a minute, stop. We're not talking about me and what I did at one period of time. We're talking about you and how you harmed me. You need to address this issue. And that's the same thing with Jennifer. You need to address the issue at hand. I sent you a grievance letter by contract outlining the problems with the mortgage transaction for you to take corrective action. I expect you to take corrective action.
Exactly. Okay. Thanks for joining in, Jennifer, and your question. And you and Storm can go kind of sort that out better. And I hope that we kind of touched on the deficiency judgment issue too, because it all goes to the same thing. You have to have something to use back against them to counter what they've used against you. So it is what it is. It's not like you can go and buy a new $100 handbag, you know, and get the same joy out of it. But this is the best money I've spent in the whole 9 years that I've been in for fighting a foreclosure. So that's all, you know, that's my own testimony. Thank you so much.
We were able to help you.
Thank you so much for your time, Storm. And I can pretty much be assured that we will speak about this again at some point. But I will field any phone calls over to you. And thank you, listening audience, and thank you for those who listen to this later when it gets archived. And I hope something we had to say helped you.
Okay, my dear. Thank you.
Thank you.
Enjoy your evening.
All right, you too.
Take care.